Well, good evening, everyone in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, June 12th, 2024, and I'm Kerry Lambert, and I welcome you to an evening of Solutions for New Alberta brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. APP's purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect the prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and self-determination by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship within or without Canada. Of course, we wouldn't be able to do this without your help. If you can, please share this webinar. We are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, Rumble, as well as after this live, we're also on other video and audio sites like Apple, Spotify, BitChute, and Vimeo, etc., etc. I want to pull up the new and improved Alberta Prosperity Project website and put that up on there as well. Of course, you can find out more about the Alberta Prosperity Project by going to albertaprosperityproject.com, and you'll find out everything that you need to know about memberships. Memberships are 1 year for $20, 2 years for $30, 3 years for $40, or you can make a donation at albertaprosperityproject.com. We also have our Support 5 initiative. If you go under the Support Us, it talks a little bit about that. The idea is that we want you to help us by doing 555, and that is 5 minutes a week on social media, liking, sharing, commenting on our posts, recruiting 5 new supporters monthly. And of course, that grows our community strength and reach and network, and a $5 monthly donation to fuel our initiatives, empowering us to plan effectively and push forward towards our goals of a referendum on independence. I also want to bring up some of the events. You can go to the events page as well. Actually, I'm just going to go back so that people can see where that is. On your phone, it's right at the top, but on the website here, it's under upcoming events. And if you go there, it, of course, will tell you what's happening, including the webinars that are coming up and chapter meetings, et cetera, et cetera. We are doing, you know what? So I'm going to go off script a little bit. We did our annual members meeting last Saturday. And it was amazing. And we had, over 200 and some odd people there. Now we're actually talking about having a quarterly meeting rather than doing it just in annual meetings. So we're thinking of doing quarterly meetings and doing it in different areas of Alberta just to get the awareness out and to get more people out. If you're interested in having an event, it'd be great if you could get a hold of us. Just go to the albertaprosperityproject.com. You can also go to contact at albertaprosperity.com. Send us an email and say, yeah, I'd definitely be interested in having a meeting in my area. We're also doing door knocking campaign. I'm not sure if we actually have something on the website here, but the idea behind the door knocking campaign is to get awareness out there. We're looking for people that would be able to join our team, and you will be trained and you will get some paraphernalia to go out and knock on doors. We've already hit quite a few neighborhoods. I know they even did Edmonton last week, and to some really good response. So if you'd like to be involved with that too, by all means, get a hold of us on the Alberta prosperityproject.com. I also want to show that we're involved with lots of different things here. We are also involved with the Alberta First Pension Plan. And that tour is actually, I think, wrapping up at the end of June, or I may even go a little bit longer. But we do have events going on as well. If you're interested in doing that, Chris, that's one of the pillars for the Alberta Prosperity Project for independence. And we are in Athabasca tonight. So if you're watching and you're in Athabasca tonight, thanks for joining. But you should really be at this meeting in Athabasca. And if you don't know, didn't know about that, we're actually in Barrhead tomorrow as well. We're doing a fundraiser there. Tanner today is going to be speaking on the pension. We have Corey Morgan from the Western Standard, who will not only be discussing the pension, but what it actually means for Alberta independence. And I will be there. Yours truly, I'll be the MC. And there's also a dinner. So for $25, you can go and get a dinner, and silent auction is there. And it'll be a really fun time to go out and what else are you going to do on a Thursday, other than I think there's a Oilers game on tomorrow night. That's okay. Up in Canada, of course, we are all about the hockey, and so if you don't have plans to watch the game, please come out to Barrhead. We also have other events. I know that I'm just going to go quickly back onto here again, and we've got one in Muir. our alma mater, which is at the Whistle Stop Cafe, and that's on Friday. And we also have another one in Olds next week. And I know there's a few more events that are coming up. And if you want to know more as well, you can also go on to freedomcalendar.net. And that is through our good buddy Max, who puts that together. Thank you so much, Max. And you can even scroll down, and lo and behold, there it is right there. So you can find out more information about the event that we're doing there. I'm going to just stop that for a second because I know we have an extra special guest in the back waiting here. Tonight's episode is called What's New with the Who? I like these kind of Dr. Seuss rhymes. And it's with James Roguski, who's been on our webinars before. He was on in January and March of this year discussing the World Health Organization and more specifically the World Health Assembly Treaty. James is a researcher, author, and natural health proponent. And we'll be talking about the 77th Annual Health Assembly that just happened at the end of May that has adopted amendments to the international health regulations and agreed to continue the negotiations for the proposed pandemic agreement. So this is a live webinar, so we encourage you to ask questions and make comments throughout this presentation. Just put 3 question marks before your question so it'll be flagged and we can quickly view the questions. And of course, as we ask all the time, share. That's the only way that we're going to get people educated in Alberta and in Canada what's going on. And with that, I'm going to bring James on now. Hello, James.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate
it. Thank you. Sorry you had to listen to me rattle for 10 minutes or so.
No, it's all good. And so, you're one of the few who got, what you said correct, because the, information that's out there is astronomically misinformation.
Oh, misinformation, and some people are just doing it just for the fame, and I watch some of these videos that do come across my stream, and sometimes they will bring up like the health treaty and just put like a 30-second tag on it and gloss over it. And I think we really need to be a little bit more informed about what's happening, not only locally, because we always say what's happening in Alberta, what's happening in Canada, what's happening in the US and North America, but this is a global thing. And we need to be aware of what's going on. So I'm going to start off, James. You've been on twice already, and we love it when you come on here. I even joked in March, I hope to never speak to you again, only because if I do, then things have failed in terms of the treaty, which they have. And I mean, a lot of people were saying that, oh, yay, things are in our favor. And as you and I were discussing before we went to air, that's not entirely true. So, James, maybe just want to explain a little bit about what your background is and how you got involved with doing what you're doing.
Sure, I'll keep it as brief as possible. And believe me, if there's anybody who wants to get out of the WHO and on with the new more than I do, I don't know who they are, because the WHO, it's just got to go.
I agree.
I'm 64 years old, and one little tiny aspect about me is I have not been to a medical doctor since I was 45. Since I was 19, which is 45 years ago.
Wow.
And so you couldn't pay me to let somebody inject some unknown substances into my arm. I joke, I live about 20 minutes from downtown Los Angeles. I think you would be better off to go to downtown Skid Row in the middle of the night, roll up your sleeve, and ask some stranger if they've got some unknown substance in a syringe. You'd be better off doing that than going to the local pharmacy and inviting them to stick something in your arm. At least it wouldn't mess with your genetics or your ability to procreate. You might get high and it might be toxic for you. But I mean, how many people actually know what the ingredients in these jabs are?
Oh, I agree. I absolutely agree.
And so I've been pushing back on all of the lies of big pharma for quite some time. I managed a couple of mom and pop urban nutrition stores for a good 15 years. And if anybody's paid attention to the research that I've done with the WHO, just imagine, I did that for 15 years, digging down into natural health and, quite frankly, the lies of what people call healthcare. And so 18 years ago, I had a conversation with one too many people, and they said, oh, Jim, you ought to write a book. So 18 years ago, I wrote Your Doctor is a Liar. and I stand by that today. It's more true now than it was then. I've always given it away. You can download the ebook on yourdoctorisaliar.com. That's about cholesterol, which is a lie that's older than me. I was born in 1960, and that lie goes all the way back to the 50s. And it kind of makes me chuckle. I've seen, little smattering of things on the internet exposing, the cholesterol lie. And it's like, hey, it's about time. And everything else about the industry really is confusing people because it's based on the concept of pharmakia, which is a delusion that swallowing poison or injecting poison into your body to change your symptom pattern is actually a pathway to health. And so the way that ties in with the WHO, there's been so much confusion about these negotiations. There are actually three things that I want to talk about. You mentioned two of them, but there's a third one that snuck in before they even had their assembly. So let me try to give the quick summary. Okay. Unbeknownst to the vast majority of people, I believe, on Friday, May 24th, the Friday before the Monday that the World Health Assembly began, over on the other side of Geneva, there was an important event that very few people reported on at the WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organization. And what they had there was a treaty signing ceremony. And it's important, and it plays into what then happened in the sequence of events, because one of the disagreements that had been going on with the negotiations for the amendments to the regulations and the new pandemic agreement or pandemic treaty had to do with intellectual property. And they were haggling over it in the WHO. And quite frankly, for months, I was like, well, this is the wrong place for that argument. And so they weren't going to settle it there because there's a whole nother organization dedicated to that. So they slammed through a treaty. It's a full-on treaty. They had a treaty signing ceremony. 138 nations signed on. And what they agreed to was that if any nation identifies a genetic sequence of some kind of a pathogen, and someone wants to submit a patent application utilizing that genetic sequence, they have to name the source in the patent application. Now, I mean, from a money perspective, that's one way of making sure that you can track royalties. If a lot of money is made off of whatever that patent might be used for, if you're the person or organization or nation or whatever that submitted the genetic information, now it has to be clearly specified in the patent application. Now, many people will go, well, what does that have to do with health and the WHO and these negotiations? Well, part of the problem is people have been misled and they have gotten bad information about what these negotiations really were. And so that happened on Friday, very quietly, May 24th. At the same time, pretty much on the WHO negotiations, Director Tedros was saying, well, we're having a hard time with these negotiations. And so we hope for the best in the upcoming assembly. On Sunday, at a private little meeting that they interviewed Ashley Bloomfield, who was one of the co-chairs of the amendment group. He knew that there was going to be protests in Geneva later in the week, and he very cockily, he's being very cocky, said, "Well, we'll see who's going to be clinking champagne glasses by the end of the week." Now, if those two things weren't a clue to be paying attention because some plot twists were coming, I don't know what was. So on Tuesday, when they were supposed to discuss the treaty and the amendments, instead of doing so, they said, hey, we have an opportunity to continue these negotiations because one of the big sticking points appeared to be taken off the table with the treaty. So they said, let's have a secret drafting group and they met Wednesday, Thursday, Friday into the early morning hours, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. And just about 2 or 3 hours before they were going to have to end the session at midnight on Saturday, June the 1st, they agreed or adopted amendments to the international health regulations. They also agreed to continue the negotiations for the
Hmm.
pandemic agreement, which is what you said earlier. They're supposed to have their next meeting in July, and they're hoping to get that agreed to before the end of the year. They would call a special session if they come to an agreement. And since they've settled the issue, or it appears with intellectual property, which was one of the big sticking points, and they also seem to have settled the issue of financing both documents. That's the main thing I'm going to talk about. They probably still have a handful of things that they're in disagreement about, but it looks like they're really on cruise control. They're
Hmm.
going to do everything they can to reach an agreement and potentially sign it by the end of the year. Now, I've spoken to people who were in Geneva, and there was a big celebration going on because they heard part of the story. Oh, they're having trouble.
Yeah.
But I talked to you about this before we started recording.
Hmm.
If you've ever seen an American or a Canadian football game where somebody's running for a touchdown and they get to like the 15 or the 10-yard line and they think no one's near them and they spike the ball too soon or they fumble or they
Yeah.
get tackled,
Yeah.
um,
That's right.
the WHO just kept playing. They just kept going. They reached an agreement. They adopted the amendments. We'll talk about mostly what's in them. And the treaty, if you will, went into overtime, right?
Hmm.
They're still going. And so there's all kinds of sayings that apply. Don't count your chickens before they're hatched, and it isn't over till the fat lady sings. And you know, there's been all kinds of news reports in alternative media, and a lot of people who were involved in pushing back against the WHO.
Hmm.
And I, quite frankly, am astonished. People are claiming victory.
Yeah.
They're saying the treaty is dead and we win, the WHO loses. But quite frankly, they were the ones clinking the champagne glasses, and the news reports in the mainstream media
Yeah.
are the WHO successfully adopted amendments and they're continuing on with the treaty. I've gotten a number of emails from various organizations who, the headline is the treaty has been defeated. We organized people around the world and people pushed back. And so, congratulations, please send money.
Yeah, that's true
And
too.
now, I don't begrudge anybody, raising money for a good cause. Some of the organizations have raised up to $4.5 million pushing back against the WHO. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking to myself, wow, what could I have done with $4.5 million? Not that I'm asking for donations, but it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Um, there was no victory there, and so the air, the excitement, the pressure that had built to a crescendo just completely got popped by
Yeah.
claims of a victory that really didn't happen. So what
Yeah.
actually happened? What
Yes.
was agreed upon? You have to go back and understand why these negotiations were even happening. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of misinformation and confusion about what was being negotiated.
Hmm.
Now, I'm here to tell you it was not ever the WHO trying to, generate a coup and take over the world.
Yeah.
They love all the power, they love all the money, and they behave as if they're king of the world. But that's not what happened with the amendments. If you go all the way back to December of 2021 and put on your normie thinking cap,
Hmm.
okay?
Yeah.
Imagine that you're drinking the Kool-Aid and you're accepting the, the given narrative
Yeah. Yeah.
that in order to get over COVID, everybody on the planet has to get a couple of more jabs in their arm, and that's the path forward,
Yeah.
right? So I think probably most of your viewers think differently, but for the
Yeah.
sake of this discussion, go back and put yourself in that mindset.
Yeah.
Well, what happened in 2021, and I'm going to blame Canada, Okay, because they're the best example because the math works out really easy.
Yeah,
For about 40 million people, Canada signed a contract for 400 million jabs.
that's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Now, if you look at that, you go, what? And so, any type of true vaccine, you know, one jab should trigger your body's immune response so it identifies what's going on.
Yeah.
Two jabs is even questionable, but 10?
Yeah.
Well,
Two could be more like a twin Rex kind of thing for, there are certain things. We actually did an interview with Dr. Byron Bridle on the
mhm,
Chris Carey show last week, and he did talk about, the way a true vaccine should work is one shot and you're done. But even with those, like if you're getting tetanus, you get it, and then you got to get a booster a little later on after 20 years, that sort of thing. So yeah, that's kind of, if you talk to anybody that did get the shot, I think they've kind of got themselves, um, they've hooked themselves because they say, well, that wasn't what we were told initially. Or no, pardon me, that's always what we've been told initially, was
yeah.
that it would take more than one shot. And if you got it, you'd still be able to pass it on to someone else. And yet the traditional way of vaccine is no, that's not the way it works.
Well, in the United States, what happened is by May the 1st of 2021,
Yeah.
they stopped counting. If you recall the phrase breakthrough infections,
Yeah.
they were
Yeah.
counting breakthrough infections, which means you got the jab, but you got sick anyways.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
they stopped reporting on it on May
Yeah.
1st.
Yeah.
And then September 1st of 2021, they clearly understood that it wasn't behaving the way a vaccine should.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was not preventing infection, it was not preventing transmission, and they never really studied it for that anyways. So what did they do? Rather than be honest and say, "Hey guys, sorry, it's not working. Go back to the drawing board." They changed the definition of a vaccine not to impart immunity, but to trigger an immune response.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can inject chicken soup into your arm. It's going to
That's true.
trigger an immune response. That is just completely bogus. There's recently a court case um, regarding the Los Angeles School District that addresses the issue. The case still has to be tried, but it's not a vaccine. Period.
Mm-hmm.
End of story by any traditional definition.
Yeah.
It's not even really a treatment. It's just an ongoing, assault and battery, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah.
And so erasing all of the things that we just said, putting on your normie cap and going back to thinking that that was the answer,
Yeah.
there were nations around the world who looked at Canada saying, "Hey, you guys are hogging up all that good stuff." And they weren't able to get as many jabs and drugs as they wanted. So nations called for negotiations to be organized by the WHO because
That's right.
they're the meeting place. And in order to arrive at what they called a convention, agreement, or other international instrument to ensure equitable access to pandemic related products. They felt that nations like Canada were hogging up all these wonderful gems, and that wasn't a fair deal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in addition to that, South Africa and Botswana, if you recall, they identified what they claimed was a brand new variant, Omicron.
Mm-hmm.
And when they handed over the genetic information, Pfizer and Moderna made a couple of more $1 billion by putting that ultimately into the booster. And they're like, "Hey, wait a minute. Where's our piece of that pie? We're the
Mm-hmm.
ones who handed you that information." Now, this is where I think so many people have gotten information that is exactly upside down and backwards. When the nations called for amendments, one of the first things that the African nations claimed was, "We're not giving any more of our sovereign biological resources over to anybody
Mm-hmm.
unless the benefits that are come from those are guaranteed." Well, that's actually an expression of sovereignty. They're saying, "Look, we found this." It's kind of like you discover a gold mine or an oil deposit or natural gas or something like that. That's a sovereign biological resource. It literally says that in Article 3, Section 1 of the treaty or
Yeah.
agreement,
Okay.
that these bits of genetic data, whether you believe viruses exist or the contagion theory or any of that, on one level that's irrelevant. If they come up with a genetic sequence and they get people to believe, through simulating that in the computer or generating it with artificial intelligence or whatever, that is an unbelievably valuable commodity. Look at how many hundreds of billions of dollars were made off of SARS-CoV-2.
That's right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So these negotiations have not been about, oh, how do we help people become healthy? It's always been a trade dispute.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened was these negotiations got started, and what they asked for is very similar to, if you've ever heard the saying, if a man is hungry and you give them a fish, you feed them for a day.
That's
But
right.
if
Yeah.
you teach them how to fish, they can handle it, for themselves. Well, what the nations originally asked for was they wanted to create an allocation mechanism. And this was in Article 13A, both from Bangladesh and the African nations. They wanted the WHO and the Director General, if they got news that there was some type of an outbreak or some problem, that they could look to the most likely wealthier nations and say, look, you guys make these things, like Canada makes a lot of lipid nanoparticles,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? You guys have, capacity. You have to give this to this area of the world because they have a problem there, and we need to stop it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Well, those were presented in September of 2022. October, November, December, then January and February of 23, there was a expert panel review committee that was looking over all of the amendments, and their advice to Tedros and to the WHO and to all of the nations was presented on February 20th of 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, look, that's not going to work. We're not going to be able to do that. We don't have the authority to command, that to happen. Go back and think of something better. Well, unfortunately, from their viewpoint, they did come up with something other than that idea. And what they have signed on to this past first day of June is a coordinated financial mechanism.
Yeah.
They call it the mechanism. Okay.
Okay.
Now, instead of saying, well, we'll just give you what you need for now, they want to raise money from every imaginable source. It's very vague and it's very undefined and it's limitless at this point, so that they can build out big pharma manufacturing capacity, laboratories, everything else under the sun to make pandemic related products be what they call global public goods. Now,
Okay.
that phrase, global public good, sounds wonderful because it includes the word good in it. But what that really is properly defined as are goods or things
Products. Yeah.
that are unlimited in availability. Okay. Now, typically that would be something like sunshine or
Mm.
air, right? Everybody can breathe as much as they could possibly imagine breathing, and there's still going to be air for everybody else.
Yeah.
Okay. This video is a global public good.
Mm-hmm.
If someone downloads this video or watches it and watches it 5 times, just because you watch it 5 times doesn't mean someone's going to get shortchanged and they won't be able to watch it because you watched it more.
That's true too. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
It should send a shiver down everybody's spine that the agreement is to funnel money into building out the infrastructure to manufacture masks and diagnostic tests that are a fraudulent use of PCR process, drugs and jabs, so that they flow like water, an unlimited supply geographically distributed around the world. Because what was the lesson learned from COVID? Well, the lessons that you learned and the lessons that I learned are different than the lessons that Big Pharma learned. Big Pharma learned that they weren't big enough.
Mhm.
They ran into some logistical problems. They ran into some supply problems. They couldn't produce 8 billion jabs, boom, like that, and get it into the arms of people around the world.
Yeah.
They got maybe 75% of the developed world, but maybe they got 25% of the less developed world.
Mhm.
So they want to develop the capacity to jab everybody on a moment's notice.
So can I just stop you there? So the money that's coming is from every country is going to be
It's
giving
it's
this?
incredibly nebulous.
Okay.
Okay. Um, in Article 44 BIS, they use that because they wedged it in between 44 and
Okay.
45, and
Yeah.
they didn't want to have to change all the numbers that follow. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, it says that they're going to create a coordinating financial mechanism.
Okay.
And, the director general will be in charge of helping nations utilize the finances in that mechanism to build out geographically distributed manufacturing. Okay. In Article 54 BIS, same idea, there's a paragraph that says, oh, that article is about the implementation committee. Well, they're going to meet whenever they decide to meet, and
Mhm.
their first task is to write the rules for the financing mechanism. So they didn't work out the details. They didn't say, oh, these nations have to give this. We're going to get money from these various funds, the World Bank, the Pandemic Fund,
Exactly.
the
Yeah, yeah.
African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the European Development Bank. I mean, whatever financial organizations you can imagine. And they certainly didn't say anything about any kind of audit trail of, what are the priorities by which we're going to do all this financing. It's super, super
Vague.
nebulous,
Yeah.
and it's unlimited. How much money can they raise to shove through this mechanism being controlled by the WHO?
Yeah.
Now, if that doesn't sound like an opportunity for corruption, if that doesn't sound like an opportunity for crony capitalism,
Yeah.
I've dubbed it the new OPEC, right? OPEC is oil producing and exporting countries.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it's a cartel and they try to
Uh-huh.
control prices and supply and everything. Well, this is really the organization of pandemic emergency corporations. They want billions of dollars to go make masks and drugs and jabs and diagnostics to put in their distribution warehouses. The WHO proudly says that they have a 20,000 square meter distribution hub in Dubai. That's
Wow.
just one of 6 regions.
Yeah.
That's 4 football fields.
Wow.
How much corruption could you share with your buddies if you
Yeah.
had to fill more than 4 football fields worth of pandemic related products? Well, they changed the name to relevant medical products or relevant health products, and drugs and jabs and diagnostics. But at the last minute, they added gene and cell based therapies and other technologically advanced health treatments. Maybe that's something like CRISPR gene editing. Who knows? It could
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
They didn't include vitamins, minerals, herbs, simple things that would actually improve people's health,
Yeah.
because this isn't about improving your health. It's actually about making a lot of things that degrade your health so that certain small subset of people can increase their wealth.
Mhm.
Now, I think the average man, woman, and even child, when they understand what this agreement is, can smell a rat, instantaneously. All you got to do is follow the money.
Yeah.
And they didn't make it easy, because the articles that I mentioned and the paragraph that is very specific, they conveniently neglected to follow their nomenclature. All of the amendments were supposed to be put in bold font, but they
And probably at
conveniently
the end or yeah.
Well, they
So
they just conveniently forgot to make these important amendments in bold.
wow.
So if you're just glancing through the document looking for the bold text, you're going to think that that was old news, and you might not read it. And so, unfortunately, um, an enormous amount of media has gone out from our side
Hmm.
claiming victory. And I was like, I've been pushing on this for 2 years, and I'm here to tell you that we didn't make a dent in these negotiations. We raised a lot of people's attention,
Yeah.
but everybody was talking about this, and this, and celebrating a victory. And at the last minute, they kept plowing down the field, and they scored just before the game was supposed to be over, and the treaty's going into overtime. Um, there's a silver lining in this
Mm.
because I'm an optimist. They had hoped to get both documents and just drop them on the table, be like Nancy Pelosi and say, "Oh, just vote for it. You can read it later." And what I was concerned about is exactly what happened. Because people were afraid that, Tedros was going to take over the world and, blue helmeted UN troops are going to be knocking down your door to jab
That's
you.
what people were thinking.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I realized that the letdown from that fear mongering, only to find, oh, this is a trade agreement that is going to redistribute wealth around the world because big pharma needs to be bigger. Um, People just haven't read the document to comprehend. Wait a minute, that's horrific.
Yeah.
That's that's absurd. People in Alberta or California, where I live, or anywhere else, your local tyrants, they didn't need any amendments to the international health regulations. They didn't need any new treaty to abuse people over the last 4.5, 5 years. They're entirely capable of being as evil as you can imagine. What this is doing is going after the supply and the distribution and logistics, because big pharma and the nations, it's kind of hard to force a jab on somebody when the jab's not there to be forced.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. So, this is just dealing with the logistics problem that big pharma had, and the problems where local oligarchs were not able to profit. They didn't like the fact that Pfizer and Moderna took their intellectual property, pirated it, it's corporate colonialism, and made a whole bunch of money. They want a piece of that profit.
Hmm.
Now, there's one other line in there that very subtly mentions that any money that's been donated into this mechanism can be redirected to organizations and other entities that support governments. Now, the language seems very, simple, but when you think about it, you go, well, wait a minute. What kind of public-private partnerships are we talking about? So there's 400 relevant stakeholders that have all been supportive of this agreement, because that's how the money's going to flow back to them. So, like the United States gives money to Planned Parenthood, or, maybe Doctors Without Borders, or there's
Yeah. Yeah.
hundreds of organizations that do the bidding of Big Pharma, but they put this glossy, wonderful face on it. They're helping humanity in some
Big
fashion,
boat. Yeah. I
but
agree.
it's essentially, let's get jabs into little babies around the world. And so they're in line to put in grant applications to go through this mechanism to fund whatever their operations may be.
Yeah.
And so the treaty is kind of sort of more of the same. They want to incentivize looking for pathogens to bring them into a WHO coordinated laboratory network, turn all of that information into the pathogen access and benefits sharing system, which it seems like, now that they've got the patent protection and they would be named in there, then it could be tracked and their royalties could be paid. And then they want to have the WHO be in charge of distribution and logistics. So that's just kind of like icing on the top of this, crappy cake that they made. And it's more of the same. But the silver lining is we now should be able to get people to see what this really is. Now,
Hmm.
the
Hmm.
analogy that I've been using is, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the original Star Wars movie, I'm sorry, I'm going to spoil it for you. There's a scene in there where the robot R2D2 hacks into the mainframe computer of the Death Star and downloads the blueprint.
Yeah.
And then, later in the movie, Luke Skywalker uses that to blow up the Death Star.
Yeah.
Well, we have their blueprint. They want money to be flowing to big pharma to make more of the things that, hey, wait a minute, the masks don't stop infection. They actually are more likely to cause an infection.
Yeah.
The diagnostics are bogus. They should never be allowed to claim that someone is a hazard because they failed a PCR test. I mean, that's just fraudulent.
Yeah.
The drugs are harmful. And, Johnson and Johnson and AstraZeneca's jabs have already been taken off the market.
Yeah.
How much more evidence do you need?
Yeah.
Well, there's still Pfizer and Moderna, and the evidence keeps coming out day after day after day after day.
Yeah.
And they're negotiating for billions of dollars for more of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Is it insane? Is it greedy? Is it evil? Or is it, a mix of all of the above? The answer simply has to be no. This is absurd. Now, every nation can have their leader, their head of state, write a letter to the WHO, invoke Article 61, and say no to the WHO. But what you're really saying is no to an expansion of big pharma.
Yeah.
Well, do you know any politicians who have sworn off funding from big pharma?
No, as a matter of fact, I was going to get into a little bit, and maybe this is a good time to get into it. So I'm not sure if you're aware that our government, actually, I shouldn't say our government, because that's actually putting them on a pedestal that they shouldn't be on. I'm going to say the board, the United Conservative Party board, and several of the chapters are actually organizing an event, and I'm going to put it up on the screen here. Give me a second. And it takes place next Monday, and it's called an Injection of Truth.
Mm-hmm.
And in it, there's a panel of doctors, including Dr. Byron Bridle, which I mentioned earlier in our broadcast here. And this is a live event. It takes place in Calgary. And there's such an overwhelming number of people that bought tickets, and there's a waiting list that they've decided that they're actually doing a live stream. But it's not just a live stream, like anybody can go on and buy it. I think I'll just click in here just to kind of show you. So you can actually buy your own member pass for this, but you can also do an online viewing party. So there are people that are going to be buying this and watching it in their homes. But more importantly, there's actually going to be community halls filled with hundreds of people watching this so that they get the word out. And it really is in regards to some of the WHO stuff that we're talking about, but more specifically about the harms that were created through the injections, as well as proof and all that, but also discussing the infant immunization schedule and whether or not things should be part of that. And so if anybody doesn't know about this, I'll put in the link. Actually, I'll do this right now in the comments, and then I will post it up a little bit later as well. And but I know it's at a hall that holds like 500 people. They had a VIP group. They have a dinner, blah, blah, blah. And all those were sold out. So the only thing that's left right now is the online streaming. And again, kudos to the group of the people in the United Conservative Party chapter, not the government per se, but just the chapter and the board for stepping up and basically saying, we need some accountability. These were the promises that were given to us through the UCP. And I think it's very important that, again, if people can watch this and, if you can't afford the $21, I guess, try and find a venue that will do it. I know there's a bunch of different venues. If you go on Facebook and various social media, you can probably go to find an event that might be free or might be $10, something like that, just to pay for the venue. Go out and check it out. That's what my plan is to do that next next Monday as well, because again, we've had a lot of the doctors on here. I know I think Dr. Peter McCullough is being wired in or viewed. Dr. Actually, as before I start saying this, let me just see. No, it is just the online. I was going to say, because I know that there's a specific list of where all the doctors are. Anyways, if anybody does have that link, please post it in the comments, and I will replay that. But that, I just wanted to show that to you, James, because it's not, educating what we're doing right now is actually causing people to actually do some stuff. And I think
that's spectacular.
that's the important thing,
Absolutely.
right? We're not just sitting back and hoping that the government will do the right thing. We've got a group that deals with, we're close with the government to say, no, if you guys aren't going to say we're going to put a pause on the vaccine schedule for infants, then we're going to start doing the work. We're going to show, and we're going to get a panel in, and we're going to talk about this. So
let me say something that will seem like it's a little bit of a tangent, but I'll bring it right back around.
Sure.
Someone I know in Australia did a Freedom of Information request and learned that in order to send just 2 representatives to one of the meetings in Geneva for all of these negotiations. Now, these negotiations have been going on for almost 2 years. They've got 2 separate groups. They've met, more than 10 times each. For 2 representatives from Australia to Geneva was $47,000. So multiply that times like 20 meetings with more people.
Oh, yeah.
Some countries send more. 194 nations around the world. They spent millions of dollars having these negotiations. Not one word was ever spoken questioning whether or not any of the things that they did over the past 4.5 years made any kind of sense whatsoever.
Wow.
Zero. This was all about how do we get more of these wonderful jabs and drugs and tests and masks and so forth. And now gene therapies and beyond. Okay. Clearly, the WHO is the marketing and promotion arm for big pharma.
Yeah.
It's if you look at the WHO budget, it's $4 billion a year. But compared to big pharma, that's like lunch money, right? That's practically nothing.
You're right.
And so they are the tail that is being wagged by the not invisible, but forgotten about, big dog of big pharma. And so none of this is about health. There's no questioning the hand that feeds them.
Yeah.
And so it's all just pushing for more for big pharma. One of the things that, from the United States perspective, our ambassador Hamamoto agreed with the Chinese delegation way back in April of 2023 that they should keep secret the name of the country that would be associated with whatever text edits were suggested into the treaty. And so for a year, they kept that secret. But about a month and a half ago, a document leaked out that had over 5,000 text edits that nations had submitted. Over 500 of them were from the United States. And it was crystal clear that they were just supporting big pharma. Our government was supporting big pharma negotiating essentially a trade deal to build out manufacturing all around the world. And so they're all happy and proud that they got this done. It's not what the average man, woman, and child around the world was thinking that they were working on, because the misinformation over the last year about what the heck was going on behind closed doors was misguided.
Yeah.
But they got more than they ever asked for. They wanted, give a man a fish and feed him for a day. They wanted to get the jabs that they needed when they needed them. And they're like, Oprah Winfrey, you get a car and you get a car, you get an mRNA factory and you get an mRNA factory. It's a horror show.
Yeah.
And I do believe that we have an opportunity to get people to look at what actually has been agreed upon
Hmm.
and scream and yell and rant and rave and jump up and down, peacefully, but in a very firm way. What in the world are these people doing other than stealing money and trying to harm people by building out the industry that
Yeah.
didn't do us any good over the past 4 years, did a lot of people a lot of harm, and they won't even talk about it.
Hmm.
And Tedros comes out and says, "Oh, we're going to have to get more, forceful with all of these anti-vaxxers." Well, I'm anti-biological weapon. I'm anti-poison. I'm anti-suffocation.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm anti-fake test to scare people with a case demic and use a fake test to restrict people's freedom to live their lives. And so, thanks for the opportunity to share this with your audience. This unfortunately was not a victory. This
Yeah.
was a crushing, defeat. And people out there who are claiming victory and fundraising off of it, take a good hard look at what people have had to say about what happened at the World Health Assembly, and question them as to, well, what are you doing now
Yeah.
to push back against what is clearly a WHO victory?
Yeah.
They agreed to amendments to the international health regulations, and the treaty negotiations start next month.
Yeah.
This is not the time to tell people to fall asleep because everything is okay.
Yeah.
You know, their house of cards is shaky, and we should be pushing on it with all our might to
Yeah.
topple it over.
Yeah.
So, I think everybody needs to speak up.
Yeah.
And,
We may
keep
have
going.
briefly talked about this in a previous episode, but I just want to reiterate, or at least ask the question again. So, who is actually in charge of getting? How do I word this? Is it a federal government? Is it a federal issue in, at least in the U.S., in terms of talking to the WHO, or is that more at the state level? Because the reason I'm asking that is because even though the feds are the one that talk to the WHO, and at least that's what the it looks like in the media, we always have our prime minister talking with them. Health is still a provincial issue. And I don't know whether or not we actually have each individual province talking to the WHO at all, or if it's
Um,
more just federal.
I think I can answer that question
Okay.
both for
Okay.
Canada and
Yeah.
for the United States. Um, these negotiations are not about health.
No, no, you're right.
This
Yeah.
is about money.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in Canada, any international agreement, Parliament and the provinces have no say whatsoever. It comes down from good old King Charles III to the Governor
Okay.
General to the
Okay.
Prime Minister and their cabinet.
Okay.
They solely have the authority to decide whether or not they get involved in any kind of international agreement. Now, if it was health related, which was the fallacy that was being put around the world over the last year, um, then the question you're asking would make sense. But that's not what this is about. This
Yeah, I
is
agree.
about federal money, okay? Because it would be a federal. Well, how much money does Canada want to give to
Yeah.
this new financing mechanism? All kinds of foundations, like the Gates Foundation and such, can be putting money into the pie. Um, and in the United States, it's the same thing. Our federal government has zero authority
Mhm.
over healthcare, but this in the United States actually falls under Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the Constitution, which is the Commerce Clause. The states, when they wrote the Constitution and created the federal government, gave 18 enumerated authorities to the federal government. One of those was to regulate international trade.
Mhm.
And so the problem with this is it's in many ways not a constitutional issue. It's a corrupt, mafioso, racketeering, crony capitalism, fascism, public-private partnership business deal. You know, People would be better off thinking about NAFTA or the Trans-Pacific Partnership
Mhm.
and use those as examples. These are nations cutting a deal, and it's not for our benefit, it's for the benefit of the small number of oligarchs who are going to apply for money to build out the industry
Yeah.
that harms people.
Yeah.
And it's a really slick deal. I mean, they crafted some very powerful language that'll put you right to sleep. It'll
I'm sure.
confuse the daylights out of people. But when you actually read into it, well, what is it that they wanted? What is it that they got? They
Hmm.
got, the nations who wanted equitable access to pandemic related products got financing to make their own
Hmm. Hmm.
and profit from it and have intellectual property in patents to track the royalties. Oh my goodness, this is not good by any stretch of the
Yeah.
imagination. But I do believe that if people look at it, I think everybody has sort of a gut understanding of, follow the money,
Yeah.
and that's that's what this is really all about.
No, I agree, and especially through the Alberta Prosperity Project, we always say we're for a prosperous Alberta within or without Canada. And if dealing with the WHO and WHA and all the other acronyms that deal with that in terms of a treaty, etc., if it makes sense for us not to be part of Canada in order to do that, that is something that we should have on the table. We should be taking control of that and having that discussion. And if us as a province, the people in the province don't agree with what's happening, we should be able to say no, we don't want part of this. Let's step two is how do we get out of Canada? So
May the discussions continue. Yeah, there you
yes,
go.
exactly.
And so I always give everybody my phone number. I'm in
Oh yes,
California.
absolutely. You are
So
correct.
my number is 310-619-3055.
I'm going to
Um,
copy that right off of
It's
your
on my
X
it's
page
on
here.
my
Yeah,
X account, 310-619-3055, and everything can be found on jamesroguski.substack.com.
that's right.
Um, Step number one, people always ask, "What do I do?" Step number one is just get clear on what the heck just happened.
Yeah.
Okay, and one of the problems is hearsay. I don't want anybody to believe a word I said. Go find the documents. They're readily available on, the articles that I have there. Read what is in there and identify for yourself, wait a minute, what is going on here? Now, back on June 1st, where it says, if you go down to June 1st, I published an article, adopted. So you may have to go down a little bit further.
Further to
That's where
forward.
all of the June 1st adopted. Um, that's where you can download the document. You can read the things that I've been talking about right now,
Okay.
and verify for yourself that what I'm telling you can be verified by their official documents. Right under the pharmakia thing, um, there's a couple of links. Pharmakia is all about getting people to swallow poison in pursuit of health. And so right below that, it says read the documents. And
Mhm.
those are the articles that were amended. And down below are excerpts from all of that. That's the actual meeting
Okay.
where they went through this kind of sort of pseudo adoption process, not really a vote. And then there's excerpts down below so people can get the short version of what's there. Once you understand what is really going on, then share the information with somebody else. If you bump into resistance of people who just don't care, they just don't want to know, or they just full on believe that more drugs and more jabs and more tests and more masks are the path forward,
Yeah.
seriously, don't waste your time. Bless them on their way. Pray for them and hope that they can, come to their senses.
Yeah.
I suggest identifying your allies because there are millions of us. We just need to get better organized, better, more clear on what is going on. And
Yeah.
then you focus that energy where it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And, unfortunately, Biden is the one who pushed for this, meaning his administration.
Mhm.
I really doubt that your prime minister is going to push back against the hand that feeds him.
I agree.
But if enough people come to an understanding that big pharma is the problem, okay, people will start stepping away from
Yeah.
that. When you have a problem, don't fall for the advertising that we get here in the United States. Don't just blindly ask your doctor what drug to take. There are endless list of other things that are beneficial. If you can't at this point recognize how badly we've been lied to by the medical field. Um, I wish all the best for you,
Yeah.
because that is not the path to health. That is the path for them to increase their wealth based on your suffering due to their treatments.
Yeah.
So I trust that there's enough people who have awakened to the truth about pharmakia.
Yeah.
I'll leave you with this. In my version of the English language, the P on pharmacy is silent. And so be careful when you walk into one.
Pharmacy. Yeah, you're right. Yes, exactly. That's very true. Well, again, thank you, James, for all of the information that your Substack is amazing. I look forward to it's pretty much every day you send an email out relating to some of the stuff, the research that you've done, and I look forward to getting those and perusing them. And again, it's just like we were talking about at the beginning. Wow, it's pretty overwhelming, the amount of information that we have out there, but it's great that we do. And especially when we have people like you that are basically taking this, you're the one that's going out and looking instead, so that we don't have to be, right? But at the same time, you just mentioned, don't just take your word for it. Make sure that you check it out.
And
that's
in simplistic terms, follow the money.
Yes, absolutely.
Good rule of thumb.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, thanks again. And I'm just going to pop this one more up again here. The Injection of Truth event, which happens on Monday. And this is actually at an injection of truth.ca. I'm just going to put that again in the comments. And yes, again, the live events are sold out, but we can definitely do the streaming. And you know what? Now that I say this out loud, I'm going to see, and I'm not making any promises, I'm going to see whether or not we can somehow do an event through the Alberta Prosperity Project with this. I know a few of the people that are involved with this. I'm going to find out whether or not we can do a live stream through the Alberta Prosperity Project, and basically, make it available to our members. I'm going to follow up with that tomorrow. So make sure that you check your newsletter that comes out every week, every Monday, and from the Alberta Prosperity Project. And if we're able to do that, I will definitely have the link in there, and I'm sure it'll be like right at the beginning, or right at the top of the newsletter. So with that,
may I ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
It doesn't say on there, but I'm assuming that it would be 6 p.m. Mountain Time.
It probably would be, because it is in Calgary. Yes, exactly. So I'll send you the link as well there, James.
Thank you much. I'm aware of it, but please do send it again. Absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. Oh yes, and that's right. And there are two other events that I'm aware of. I think they're doing one in Red Deer and one in Edmonton, but with a smaller group of doctors. And I think Jamie Soleil from well, I'm not sure which group she's with right now. She was with Canadians for Truth. I think she's doing her own thing now, but I think she's the one that's going to be moderating that as well. So I think Dr. William Mackis is going to be on there. Again, I don't necessarily want to be quoted for that, but definitely go on to the aninjectionfortruth.ca and check that out. So with that, again, thanks again so much, James.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm pretty sure at this rate, we're going to be talking every 2 or 3 months. So looking forward to the next conversation and seeing what's going on then.
Thanks, Gary. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Have a good night. Cheers.